Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MC65 FM podcast. Cloud adoption has never been faster, but with the speed comes complexity. Networks are no longer just cables and switches, they are software defined, automated, globally distributed, and expected to be sure from day one. Whenever you're deploying Azure Function, building landing zones, or managing hundreds of virtual networks across multiple subscriptions, network has become one of the most critical skills in Azure ecosystems. Today's guest has spent nearly 3 decades in IT, starting as a software developer before moving into the system engineering, network and cloud infrastructure, and ultimately becoming one of Microsoft's most recognized experts in Azure networking. He's a Microsoft MVP, Microsoft certificate trainer, community organizer, speaker, and passionate about advocate for infrastructure as a code and secure cloud architecture. Yeah, please welcome Rex Koning.
Thank you very much. That was some intro.
Yeah,
Welcome everybody.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, you have been working in IT for nearly 30 years. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
well, 30 years this year, to be honest. Yeah, I started basically to the day almost. I started somewhere in June or July 1996.
Awesome. But how did you how did you start your career, and especially how did you evolve into the Microsoft ecosystem?
How I started that was kind of easy. It's all started in beginning of the 80s, basically, with a Commodore 64, which some people might have heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that grew my interest in computers and well, IT wasn't a thing at that time, but it was the start of it. From there, I started with a PC, an XT machine with a whopping, I think we had 1 MB of RAM. Um, yeah, and then I started an IT training at school. We had a special training for that in the Netherlands. And from there, I did an internship at a company and also started working there. First, just developing websites because that was an up and coming thing in 1995 when not everybody had internet yet. uh, yeah, and started with creating websites, doing some programming. Well, kind of evolved in that. Decided to make a switch to network and system engineering because that was more my thing than really developing. So did a lot of years doing on-prem management stuff. And then something called PowerShell came along. And with my background in development, I started to pick that up. And also because it's well, for automation, it's a great tool, of course. Yeah, and from there, in 2012, I think, 2013, there was some company called Amazon that did something with web services. So we started looking at that, worked with it for a couple of years, did some certifications in there. And then, yeah, I went to another employer. They used something called Microsoft, well, not Microsoft Azure because it wasn't Microsoft Azure yet. It was what was called Windows Azure Pack.
Okay.
That that was really the beginning. So basically, what we now would call Azure Local, basically, that was Windows Azure Pack, and then from there we grew to Microsoft Azure. Yeah, started working with that, and of course also the automation came into play again. So my PowerShell knowledge was of good use there. Started working more and more with it. Well, it became bigger and bigger. Well, to what it is today, basically. Yeah, and from my background of system and network engineering, I also do a lot, of course, with Azure networking. Well, because as you mentioned in the intro, I mean, all the resources and VMs and all the services are nice, but without networking, nothing works. And yeah, grew from that. Did some sessions about it, and here we are, basically.
Yeah. Is there anything you missed from the transition from IWS to Microsoft Azure?
Well, honestly, that's been so long ago. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but basically, a lot of functionalities are the same, of course, only with different names and different dialect versions. Let's say it like that.
Yeah, and many people in companies think it's the cloud, Microsoft handles the networking. Why is that such a dangerous misconception?
Um, Mainly because networking in Azure works completely different than most people think. Um, if you are accustomed with on-premise networking, you have your networks, you have your subnets, you have your VLANs. It's all kind of clear what it does. In Azure, it's a bit different. Although you have the concept of virtual networks and the concept of subnets, well, you don't have VLANs, but that's your VNets basically. Basically, all the routing and all the differentiation in the different networks, let's say it like that, is not done in a network concept. It's done on the virtual machine or on the resource itself. So basically, well, besides some resources that really need a different subnet, like a firewall or a virtual network gateway, for example, basically setting up subnets isn't really necessary because everything is handled on the virtual machine. And it's much more important to have your network security groups as a first line of defense over to shield off your machines or your resources um, than thinking of the concept in virtual networks.
And I think we have two concepts. We have we have hub and spoke, and we have virtual WAN. When should companies choose hub and spoke, and when virtual WAN?
Well, it's kind of a consultant answer, but it depends on what you want, of course. Uh, hub and spoke is in the basis also a legacy thing that comes from the on-premise world.
Mm,
On the one hand, it doesn't make much sense to set it up like that in Azure. On the other hand, a lot of companies do it
mm,
because it works and it's a familiar territory. But of course, it also has its drawbacks. For example, if you want on-premise connectivity from one branch to connect to an on-premise in another branch, that's not going to work with HubSpoke by default.
mm,
There are some ways by using route server or those kind of things to make it work. But that's one of the reasons why Virtual WAN was created by Microsoft. It's certainly not the holy grail,
mm,
but it does what it does. And it because it's a managed service, it makes life and routing a lot easier for a lot of people. The big drawback with it at the moment, and yeah, we can only hope that it will improve, is that because it's a managed service, you have no idea what's going on under the hood. So when things don't work, it's quite a hassle to find out what the problem is and how to fix it. So that's why you see more and more that people are using route server instead of virtual one.
mm. I think one other hot topic or actually topic is in the whole Microsoft ecosystem, but especially in Azure, it's multi-region. What are the biggest network challenges there?
Um, well, with multi-region, you have of course a couple of challenges. Besides the network challenge, you got to make a decision. For example, do I have a hot configuration? So do I have all my resources in another region or not? Or in example for DR construction, am I going to build up my resources if one region fails, which is probably not going to work with all the resource availability problems there are at this time. But another thing you need to think about, of course, with multi-region is the latency.
Mm,
For example, if well, we're here in Europe, so when we play stuff in Western Europe, and then we connect to Northern Europe or Germany or Sweden or the UK. That's all pretty much next door. But for example, if you have a region in Singapore or towards China, which is a lot further away from here, you really need to think about your latency, because yes, some functionalities might not work the way you expect with longer latencies, or your responses might be delayed. And delayed is a big word because it's not seconds, of course, but yeah, your latency is becoming greater and greater. And another thing with multi-region, of course, is if you go from one region to the other, since it's egress traffic for a specific region, you're also having a lot of extra costs, probably, depending on the volume of data traffic.
Yeah. One of your favorite topics is Azure Virtual Network Manager. For listeners unfamiliar with it, what problem does it solve, and why has Microsoft created?
Well, why they exactly created it, that I don't know, of course. But it solves quite a few problems, to be honest. And it's also a resource that is not used, in my opinion, enough at the moment. But it does a couple of things. On the one hand, it has IPAM in it, so IP address management. So what you can do, and especially when you have multiple branches, multiple networks, you can put all your network ranges in your IPAM, and from there you can assign the ranges towards networks. So you will always know which networks are in use, how many IP addresses you have in use, more importantly, how many IP addresses you have free. And the great thing of IPAM is you can also put your on-premise networks in there and just give them a tag that they cannot be assigned in Azure. Otherwise, you get some nice troubles. But yeah, it makes it one pane of glass basically to see which networks are in use and how many addresses you use. And another thing it does is it helps you setting up connectivity between your networks. So you can make a star network if you want. You can make hub spoke setup if you want, just with one setup. And then when you add new networks to your environment, you can just give them a tag. And then when the virtual network manager sees that tag on a network, it will automatically load it into the hub spoke, for example, and set up all the routing so everything works as expected. Another great thing that it is in Virtual Network Manager is another security feature. We mentioned the network security groups. So if you know network security groups, that's basically, well, let's say IP tables in Linux. You set up some rules. They work from top to bottom. So everything you open up at the top and gets passed through until you block everything at the bottom, and then you're set to go. But if you have a lot of networks with a lot of network security groups and there is a problem, you might not want to go through all network security groups to open up a specific port or to test something. And with Azure Virtual Network Manager, you have basically an admin rule that you can push towards all network security groups that are connected to the Azure Virtual Network Manager. And every rule that you put in there gets a preference over all the rules in your standard network security groups. So if you want to open up port 443, for example, towards everything in all your networks, you just make one rule, and it automatically gets placed in front of the NSG. So basically, when you have an NSG, you give an order to it. So starting with 100 up to 65,535, if I say it correctly. And basically, what the admin rule does is make it basically from 1 till 99. So it really gets put in front of it. So the rules that you put in there are always allowed or denied if you want that. That's also an option. And a third thing that it basically does is routing. So basically, when you set up a hub-spoke network at this moment, you always have to create UDRs, user-defined routes, to route all the traffic from your spokes towards a firewall or whatever you have in your hub to send the traffic towards the internet. Of course, mistakes are easily made if you do these things. And by using the routing options from Azure Virtual Network Manager, you can all do it from one place. So you basically just have to maintain one route table, and you can push that towards all networks if you want.
Okay, I think a little bit that, for people. Normally, the people love to have one big LinkedIn network, one big Facebook network. Why companies should have more networks than one big ultimate network?
That's kind of a trick question. um, well, why you should have smaller networks in Azure is basically just because people are stupid and it's easier for people to understand. Because, like I said before, everything in Azure, especially if you use peering and those kind of things, it becomes one big network. And because all the routing is done at your virtual machines or at your platform service, if you have a dozen small networks of one big network, if you pair them together, it's still one network. So for Azure, it really doesn't matter because it's one network anyway. And that's why your network security groups are so important. Because a lot of people say, well, we run Azure Firewall, so we don't need network security groups. But because it's one big network underneath, they tend to forget about that. And that's why your network security groups are so important. Because if you make one mistake in your routing, then the different machines can still talk to each other. And that's not always desired.
When we talk about network security, what are security admin rules?
Security admin rules, those are the things I just mentioned from the Azure Virtual Network Manager. So basically, those are the rules that you can put in front of the rules in the network security group. And basically, well, they have three options. They have an allow, they have a deny, and I can't remember how it's exactly called, the third option. But the third option is just put it in there, and even though if it's allowed and it gets blocked in the NSG later on, then block the traffic. So you can make it a normal security rule basically, or you can really override the NSG rules so that your traffic is always allowed.
Can I work on Azure Virtual Network Manager or the network security groups? Can I also use their Bicep to set up?
Yes, luckily. Now, definitely everything that's in. So the Azure Virtual Network Manager is a separate resource that you can set up. And then you have the IPAM, you have the connectivity, the security, and the routing settings, and each of them can be set up with Bicep. So everything you can set up as infrastructure as code. Do your tests around it. Use what if deployments to see if it does what if. Well, if it's gonna deploy what you think it's gonna deploy. So yeah, that's all taken care of, and it works perfectly.
I think also one topic we have to speak about is Azure landing zones. Can you tell us a little bit about what is it and how well, is it integrated in the Azure Virtual Network Manager?
Well, landing zones by themselves. Well, let's start by the beginning. What a landing zone is, indeed.
Yeah.
Basically, if you look, well, let's take the hub spoke model as an example here. So if you look at the Azure well-architected framework, if you have a rainy Sunday afternoon, look it up and read through the Azure architecture pages. It's going to take you a couple of days. But basically, if you have your setup, you have your hub. That's where you basically have all your connectivity, your routing, your firewall, everything that makes up the basic platform basically. And then for the spokes, or and another word for the spokes is either landing zone or workload. So basically, if you have a specific workload, so for example, if you have some web application, you'll put that in a different spoke. You could put your database in a different spoke. You could have different departments having different landing zones or different spokes. That kind of depends on the setup of the company, or how you set up your spokes. But basically, a landing zone or a spoke is a closed off environment which does a certain job depending on what it is. And from there, all the traffic goes towards the hub, to your firewall or to your outgoing device. That could be an Azure firewall, could be a NOT gateway, could be a virtual network appliance like Cisco, Fortinet, so whatever you're using. But it's a self-contained piece of networking, basically.
When Microsoft came to you and say, "Hey, Rex, we give you all the manpower, all the money you need," what feature will you develop for the Azure Virtual Network Manager?
Not so much a feature,
Okay.
but more some clarifications. And for example, you have connectivity, and you can set up a mesh network or a hub and spoke network automatically from Azure Virtual Network Manager. But the problem is you can only have one active at a certain VNet at a time, which makes sense, of course. But if one is already deployed, and you're going to deploy it again or another one, it doesn't say it's already connected to something. So basically, I would just build in some extra reporting tools, basically, to show how the setup is at the moment. And if something is already set up in a specific way, that you first get a warning before overriding it, for example.
Yeah.
I would have some other network resources that I would improve, by the way, but that's not Azure Virtual Network Manager.
Infrastructure as a code is actually, I think, it's gone from nice to have to essential. Why is this actually so a hot topic?
Well, I don't. Yeah. Well, is it a hot topic? It's basically on everybody's mind for. Well, it should be on everybody's mind for years, of course. And that's basically because of that nice word that somebody invented, omnipotent setup. So basically, when you set up a landing zone in one location, and you want to do that again or in another region or for another customer, you always want them to look exactly the same. And yeah, like I said before, a lot of people are stupid, and it's difficult to do things the same every time. Also, people are lazy and don't want to do that. So if you set it up in infrastructure as code, that it has multiple advantages. It will always set things up always in the same way that you want it. Another thing is that you can do the what if deployments. So you can really check what is going to be deployed and is that still the same thing that I intended to deploy. And another thing, if your code is set up correctly and you got your pipelines and your runs in order, you can also use Pester, for example, to do some tests to make sure that all your code is up to date, that all parameters are filled with things that you want before really going into Azure and perhaps being blocked by a policy that you set up or all those kind of things.
Yeah. Um, uh, um, when did you first start using infrastructure as a code?
Um, when did I start? I think I think that was in my Amazon days already. So 2012, 2013. I can't remember what we used back then, to be honest. I think it was. No, I have no idea anymore.
Mm. Okay, yeah,
But
no.
yeah, we started with, especially for the Windows Azure Pack, for example, it was all PowerShell with DSC, desired state configuration. Yeah, and nowadays, well, in my case, because there are multiple things that you can do, of course. But for me, I work with PowerShell, Azure CLI, Bicep, and Azure Virtual Verified modules.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, you say Amazon, so there you cannot use biceps. So I think
No,
Terraform is here. I don't know if it's Terraform, but how to choose bicep, Terraform, templates? Yeah, when is what the right tool?
um, well, depends on your environment, of course. Like you said, in Amazon, you can use biceps, so you would probably use Terraform. But it's also what you're used for, what you're used to use. So I'm using. I'm coming from the Microsoft world basically for the last 12, 13 years now.
Mm.
For me, well, we started with ARM templates because that first was the only thing that was there for deployments, and then luckily they came with a more readable language, Bicep, for deployments. So yeah, for me that was a logical step to move on to Bicep. I know there are a lot of people that use Terraform also for deployments towards Azure. Um, yeah, for me it was just the logical choice to go to Bicep. But
Uh,
there's really no wrong, right or wrong in this. It's just use the tool that you need, not the tool that somebody wants you to use.
mm. um, where do in this picture fit the Azure verified modules in?
Well, the Azure Verified modules are basically a set of Bicep modules.
Hmm.
Um, they are developed in the basic by Jack Tracy from Microsoft, and it's just yeah, comprehensive set of modules which touch, well, not 100% of all Azure resources yet, but quite a lot of them. And they get updated very very well on a reasonable scale. It's also open source, so you can make your own PRs to it. I have also done that a couple of times. So if you're missing something that is offered by Microsoft via the portal, so you know there are options, and you can find all the documentation in Microsoft Learn, of course. But if you see that it's missing in the Azure Verified modules, you can just edit, create a PR, and then it will get implemented. For example, I had something last year which was for a virtual network gateway, and it was kind of an edge, a niche thing that nobody used a lot, but which I needed for a specific customer. And that didn't work correctly in the AVM modules. So we created a fix for it, and it's now part of the modules. So that's also nice to see your own code now being used by everybody that uses that specific functionality.
Mm. Um, when I handle my projects, I normally use DevOps. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm an old guy,
Same here.
or someone, uh, yeah, uh, treat me to use Git. But how do you organize your large infrastructure as code projects?
Um, well, we always use, mostly use Azure DevOps still. And that's not because GitHub is not good, because GitHub is definitely perfect for it. But the main advantage of Azure DevOps is that you also have the boards in there, and which is not as good yet in GitHub. So you have everything in one place. But yeah, we definitely always use some kind of source control system, whether it's Azure DevOps or GitHub in our case. That there are more, of course, like GitLab or Bitbucket or those kind of things. We don't use them, but so for us, it's mostly Azure DevOps.
When we think, or when would you say every networking should always deploy through code?
I would say so, although it's not always possible. For example, if you deploy Databricks, it will deploy some things on its own, so you have no control over that. But basically, well, not only networking, by the way, you should deploy everything via code. And of course, that has the main advantage that if you have to redeploy it again, you can deploy it in the same way. But also, if for some reason you break something on your environment, on the one hand, you can restore a backup, of course, but that doesn't always have all the settings for a virtual machine, for example, or and especially for your network settings, well, you can't back up those, so you need to have those in code. And if you have one network, well, you can get away with it to use ClickOps and create it manually. But if you have to create 300 of them, for example, well, have fun. You don't want to do that by hand.
And how can we, or how do you balance flexibility with standardization?
That's always difficult. But yeah, as long as if you set up your infrastructure as code, well, as I would say correctly, but if you keep your standards there, and work with parameters where needed, you get a lot of flexibility even in your default code.
When we think a little bit about the new trend, copilots everywhere, can AI help developers write better infrastructure as code?
It can definitely help as long as the focus is on help. No, it can definitely help, especially if you know what you're doing. It saves you a lot of time because you don't have to type in everything yourself. It becomes a problem when you're not exactly, if you don't exactly know what you're doing, and when it generates code and you have no idea what it's doing. So, for example, I've seen people have creating stuff with Copilot to create a script to do something because something was not working, and they didn't check the script that was created, and then it was by domain controller. So it's definitely a tool. If you're able to, definitely use it because it saves you a lot of time. But yeah, always check what it's generating.
And yeah, did you see some common mistakes newcomers make in infrastructure as a code?
Yeah, well, the most things that I see is that people do not create network security groups. Just believing that, well, it's a closed off environment, so we don't need them between our different networks because yeah, well, we have a firewall in place, so we don't need that. And yeah, that's something that's not necessarily a big problem, but it can become a big problem if somebody finds some way into your network, and then yeah, they have access to everything in one go.
Mm, mm. I see one of your talking topics is really that's has a really fascinating question. Can Azure Function actually be secure? Let's start here. Why do people worry about Azure Functions?
Well, it's not only Azure Functions, it's also web applications. I just used Azure Functions in my talks because it's easier for me to create an Azure function with some functionality as an Azure web app. But that's just me. But the same principle count for both. But of course, an Azure function can be used to directly talk to machines inside your network, to get data from inside your network and send that somewhere. And because it's just fire and forget basically. You throw something in there, it does something, and it spits some answer out, and you have no idea what happened in the back and where it went, and who's calling the function, for example. And another thing with Azure Functions, for example, um, if you have to get information from a third party, they often do IP whitelisting.
Mm,
And by default, I think there are 25 or 30 addresses that are used for outgoing traffic from a function app or from a web app. And yeah, not all third parties want to open up all those 30 IP addresses to be sure that your function will work correctly. So if you use VNet integration with your virtual network, you can route all that traffic via a NOT gateway, for example, so that it always goes out with the same IP address, which makes IP whitelisting a lot easier. And another thing that you can do, and which you might want to do anyway, is if you do VNet integration and you send your traffic not towards a NOT gateway, but towards your firewall, you can also monitor the traffic that is outgoing from your function app or your website in the firewall logs, and you have to really open up the different IP addresses that it can talk to. So it's really multi-level security in some simple goals, and the same is for the incoming traffic. Basically, normally all traffic comes in directly from the internet. That's not something that you want. So if you set it up with private endpoints, you close it off completely from the internet, so it stays completely internally. So you can reach it from within your network. You can reach it from your connected network. You can even reach it from Power Platform, for example, if you use VNet integration, VNet injection from there. But you can still put, for example, a front door or an application gateway in front of it to make it reachable from the internet if you want. But by using a different device in front of it, you also minimize your attack surface. So it has multiple advantages to put network security in place for your Azure function.
I think the security topic is really interesting. What are the most, or what mistakes did you see in most or often when it's come to Azure Function?
Yeah, well, basically that there is no security at all. And Azure Function is, like I said, basically a web application. But for a web application, you have some security options that you can put in place, like OAuth and those kinds of things. You don't have that for Azure Functions. That's why it's also a great subject to work with in this case. What you can do with Azure Function is assign keys. So basically, you have a key or a token that you can pass as a parameter, to kick off the function. But as soon as that parameter gets out, then everybody still knows it. So that's not really, a decent way of doing things, in my opinion. So basically, it's just everybody just makes them available for everybody, And of course, you do have some network functions you can block on IP addresses, but yeah, that's not always the best way to go.
Mm. Um, I think another topic when we talk about security, it's authentication. How should developers think about it?
Well, that again depends on the type of service that you offer.
Mm.
Um, for some, it is enough to just set OAuth and have them authenticate against your intra tenant, for example. But it could also be that it uses an internal database, for example, of user accounts. So there are different ways, but yeah, if you can use an OAuth flavor, let's say it like that, I think that's one of the best ways at this moment.
Mm.
And please do not use basic authentication anymore if that's still an option. But
And I think, yeah, what a little bit played in this, or often I hear often it's managed identity. What is it? What is it, and what role does it play?
I'm not sure how I. Well, basically, a managed identity is what it says that it is. It's an identity that
Mm.
is either managed by Microsoft, so a system managed identity,
Mhm.
or you have user managed identities. And in that case, um, you set a secret on it yourself and do some things with it. But basically, what it is, it gives, for example, a virtual machine or another resources that they're in key vaults, they're in all kinds of resources nowadays in Azure. But basically, it gives it the option to have that, for example, a virtual machine. If you give that a managed identity, you can give that managed identity, for example, reading rights on a key vault or on a secret in a key vault, so that from that virtual machine it can read a secret.
Mm.
And otherwise, you would have to set it up with user authentication, or for example, if you go to a storage account with a storage account, a SAS key, for example. But using managed identities, you don't have to throw those tokens around, basically.
Mm.
But it's a lot more secure and a lot more, lot easier to manage, because it's basically just if you look at Airbag in your for your resources, you can just also see the managed identity in there and what rights it has, give it other roles or whatever you need.
And when we talk about security, how important is Defender for Cloud in this?
Well, to be honest, that's not really my cup of tea.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, the Defender for Cloud with all its different flavors, let's say it like that, because it's a whole suite nowadays, of course. It definitely, especially if you for smaller companies, especially where you don't have a scheme like Sentinel or those kinds of things in place, and also if you do have Sentinel, it still helps because it also throws all kinds of data towards Sentinel. But it gives you a good insight in what is happening in your environment, what you can do to secure your environment, and on top of things, because well, if you have Azure Advisor, for example, in the Azure portal, it does say for some things, well, you should make this setting to improve security, or you should make that setting. And Microsoft Azure what it's called nowadays, I think it's called Microsoft Defender for Cloud nowadays, does that on a different level. It goes even deeper and gives you more insights in possible attack paths and options that you can set up to improve security on your systems or on your services.
Mm.
So
And
you should definitely use it, but yeah, I'm not the best person to
okay.
go into depth on that.
And where do Azure Firewall and network security groups complement each other?
They definitely do, yes. I would say never set up an environment without both of them. And of course, for Azure Firewall, you could also read another NVA, of course, depending on what you're using. But yeah, always make sure that both of them are in place, because well, basically, like we said, in hub spoke networks, it's all one big network. So you want to have a so-called east to west security, so that not every machine can reach every resource within your big network. And the same goes from north south. If you go to the internet or you come from the internet, you want some extra security in place also.
Mm.
So they really complement each other in this case, yes.
And what role do zero plus zero trust plus zero trust playing in networking?
Well, with zero trust, it's almost a different ball game. There are multiple levels of zero trust. That's the fun thing of zero trust. So basically, with zero trust, you use your firewall and your NSG to close off everything, so that basically nothing can reach each other, and you only open up the things that are needed. So in your network security group, if it stay internally, or in your firewall if it has to go to the internet.
Mm.
But within zero trust, you can also use something as mesh networks, and then you basically get all islands of networks that are not connected to each other, but only talk to each other based on APIs, for example. And that works really well but of course not for every workload.
Mm. Yeah, great insights. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your community work. You are you often speak also at conferences. What did you learn from your speakings?
What did I learn from speaking? Mostly, I did learn, well, not necessarily learn, but gained
Mm-hmm.
a lot of friends and a lot of confidence.
Mm.
The reason I started with speaking at conferences, and also the reason why I became a Microsoft certified trainer in the beginning, was just to boost my confidence. I was really introverted. Well, I still am, but a little less. So it really helped me open up to people, talk to people. I still don't like to be in the picture, which sounds strange if you're standing in a podium in front of a couple of hundred people. But yeah, that's still different. But yeah, the most thing it gained for me is a lot of friends, a lot of uh, people that I can reach out to, and of course the one of the biggest compliments of all is the MVP award that I gained because of that. And yeah, still not sure why I got it, but I must be doing something right with
Yeah.
with the talks that I do and the events that I help organize and all the volunteering and putting myself out there. But it's still an honor to have that title. Yeah, and hopefully this month
Renew.
we can prolong it for another year.
Yeah, I have in every interview a quick fire round. I ask short questions, and you will say what comes into your mind. And
All
this,
right.
when Microsoft say you can only have one title, which one will stay, MVP or MCT?
MVP.
Azure CLE or PowerShell?
Then PowerShell.
Hub and Spoke or Virtual WAN?
I'm still gonna go with HubSpoke for now.
Frikandel or Bitterballen?
For me, frikandellen.
Okay. Azure Functions or Azure Container Apps?
I would say Azure Functions, but they are container apps underneath. So
What's your favorite Azure service?
Then I would go to Virtual WAN just because it has a lot of different things in it.
And what's the most underrated Azure feature for you?
I think for now, the Azure Virtual Network Manager.
Okay. When Microsoft comes to you and say, "Hey Rex, you get all the resources you need," what feature will you develop?
Oh, people are gonna hate me for this, but I would develop some of the how can I say this politely? In my opinion, Azure Firewall is missing some functionalities regarding logging and near real-time logging, and yeah, that would be something that I would look into, because that's really a drawback of the and there are ways around it, but that's really a drawback of Azure Firewall at this moment compared to other next-gen firewalls.
What Azure myth people should stop believing?
How do I say that? Well, they should stop believing that different virtual networks and subnets are really a thing.
And yeah, you do a lot of community contribution. On what project you are currently working on?
At the moment, I'm not doing any open source things, but event-wise, I'm working. In October we have a Scottish Summit in Edinburgh this year, and we just announced all the speakers today. So that's something that's taking up a lot of time. And another thing that I'm working on is cloud tech Tallinn. That's in February next year in Tallinn, Estonia. And yeah, we're working on that, on starting that edition up also within a month, I think. So that takes up a lot of my time.
Yeah, so really great interview, and yeah, so then my closing it's too hot today. My closing question is, what the single most important piece of advice you give to organizations build modern Azure infrastructures today?
Use infrastructure as code. We still see a lot of companies, even service providers, which still do a lot of ClickOps. Yeah, stay away from that. I mean, if it's in the middle of the night and you have a P1 priority urgent problem, and you need to click something to get things working, go ahead, but make sure you feed it back into code.
Yeah, then Rex, thank you so much for joining the show. This was a fantastic conversation because we covered the foundation that every successful cloud environment depends on, networking. We explore Azure Virtual Manager, infrastructure as a code, secure Azure functions, zero trust, hybrid connectivity, and why automation is no longer optional in modern cloud architecture. Yeah, one of the biggest takeaways is for me, it's great cloud architecture doesn't happen by accident. It starts with strong networking fundamentals, consistent automation, and security built into every layer from the very beginning. Yeah, so thank you so much for staying with me here, and yeah, hope we've seen us again on a meeting, podcast, live stream, or so on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure, and yeah, I love to talk. So awesome. Thank you very much.